In the summer of 1969, Los Angeles became the stage for one of the most infamous crime stories in American history. The murders committed by Charles Manson's followers weren't just shocking in their brutality. They rattled the very image of Los Angeles as a city of dreams. Hollywood mansions, music industry hangouts, and quiet suburban homes suddenly felt like crime scenes waiting to happen. Everyone knew the names of the victims: Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Stephen Parent, Lino, and Rosemary LaBianca. But what often gets lost are the deeper connections these crimes had to Los Angeles itself. The neighborhoods, the industries, and the hidden networks where Manson and his followers moved before those bloody nights. Charles Manson wasn't born in Los Angeles, but when he arrived in the late 1960s, the city seemed built for a man like him. LA was overflowing with young people searching for freedom, spirituality, and identity. The Sunset Strip was packed with musicians and hangers-on. Venice Beach teemed with drifters, and Laurel Canyon was the center of a counterculture that blended folk music with psychedelic lifestyles. Manson, fresh out of prison, slipped right into that scene. He wasn't a star, but he wanted to be, and Los Angeles was the kind of city that made even outsiders believe fame was possible. The music industry became Manson's first major LA connection. He desperately wanted a record deal, and he used charm, manipulation, and his followers to get close to musicians. Through Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, Manson found himself moving in circles that touched some of the biggest names in rock. Wilson met Manson's family after picking up two of his female followers hitchhiking. Before long, the family was living in Wilson's Sunset Boulevard mansion, running up bills on his credit, driving his cars, and throwing parties with industry figures drifting in and out. Musicians like Neil Young even crossed paths with Manson, later recalling how he pushed his songs and talked about becoming a star. For Manson, Los Angeles wasn't just a city, it was an opportunity to latch onto the fame he believed he deserved. But the city didn't give him what he wanted. Wilson eventually threw Manson out, frustrated by the chaos he brought into his home. Music executives who listened to Manson's recordings dismissed him as unpolished, unstable, or simply not talented enough. That rejection hit Manson hard. In his twisted worldview, the city that had promised him stardom had instead humiliated him. He began to redirect his ambitions, convincing his followers that violence would bring about the cultural revolution he called Helter Skelter. Another LA connection came through real estate. Manson and his family settled at Spahn Ranch, an old movie set northwest of the city. It had once been used for westerns, but by the late 1960s it was run down and nearly abandoned. The family made it their base, striking a deal with the elderly owner George Spahn. They could stay as long as they helped around the ranch and kept him company. In LA terms, it was a strange twist of fate. A forgotten corner of Hollywood's film history turned into the hideout for one of its darkest crimes. When police eventually raided the ranch after the murders, the image of hippies and cult members camped out on a dusty movie set felt like a surreal reflection of the city itself, where fantasy and reality had always blurred. The murders themselves also had deep Los Angeles ties. On August 8, 1969, the family targeted the Benedict Canyon home of actress Sharon Tate and director Roman Polanski. That house at 10050 Cielo Drive wasn't random. It had once been rented by music producer Terry Melcher, the very man who had rejected Manson's musical ambitions. Even though Melcher had moved out months earlier, Manson still sent his followers there, seeing it as a symbol of Hollywood's rejection. What unfolded that night, the murders of Tate, Sebring, Folger, Frykowski, and Parent, shattered Los Angeles. It wasn't just the violence, it was who the victims were: celebrities, socialites, people who embodied the glamour of Hollywood. Suddenly, wealth and fame didn't look like protection. The following night, Manson himself joined his followers for the murders of Lino and Rosemary LaBianca in Los Feliz. Their house, near Griffith Park, was chosen almost at random, but the location added to the city's unease. Benedict Canyon could be explained away as a celebrity target. Los Feliz was different. It was ordinary, middle class, a neighborhood where families believed they were safe. By killing there too, Manson sent a message that no part of Los Angeles was beyond reach. The aftermath of the murders tied even more tightly into the city. Rumors ran wild in Hollywood. Some whispered about satanic cults, others about drug deals gone wrong. For months, people locked their doors, bought guard dogs, and hired private security. The entertainment industry recoiled. Parties dried up, stars retreated behind gates, and Los Angeles, a city that thrived on openness and connection, suddenly felt claustrophobic with fear. The investigation itself became one of the LAPD's biggest challenges. Detectives struggled at first, failing to connect the Tate murders with the La Bianca killings. It wasn't until Manson's followers were arrested for unrelated crimes at Spahn Ranch that the pieces began to come together. When prosecutors eventually put Manson and his family on trial, the spectacle gripped LA. Courtrooms overflowed with journalists, and television crews broadcast every detail. The city became obsessed not only with the murders, but with the strange, hypnotic control Manson held over his followers, mostly young women who smiled and sang even as they faced murder charges. Los Angeles' legal system also played a central role. Prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi built the case that Manson hadn't killed with his own hands but had orchestrated the crimes through psychological control. That argument, tested in a downtown LA courtroom, set legal precedent for how cult leaders could be held responsible for the actions of their followers. It was another way in which the city's institutions became part of the story. Even after Manson and several of his followers were convicted, the LA connections didn't fade. The Cielo Drive house became a site of dark tourism, eventually demolished in the 1990s because of its infamy. Spahn Ranch burned down in 1970, but people still visit the site, curious about its history as both a film location and a crime scene. Musicians who crossed paths with Manson in Los Angeles continued to speak about their encounters for decades, often haunted by how close they had come to him before the murders. In many ways, the Manson murders marked the end of an era in Los Angeles. The 1960s had been a time of experimentation, counterculture, and free-spirited optimism. After 1969, that innocence was gone. Hollywood locked its gates, Laurel Canyon lost its glow, and the city realized that the same culture that produced music festivals and new freedoms could also give birth to something terrifying. For Los Angeles, the murders weren't just a crime, they were a turning point, a moment when the city's dreamlike image collided with a nightmare. Today, the story is still inseparable from LA. True crime tours trace the routes of the family. Books, documentaries, and films revisit the case endlessly, and the city itself still carries the scars. Every time someone mentions Benedict Canyon or a Spahn Ranch or Cielo Drive, they're not just talking about locations on a map. They're talking about places where Los Angeles' brightest lights and darkest shadows collided. The untold connections are really about how deeply the murders were woven into the fabric of LA. The music industry, the film industry, the real estate of the hills, and the quiet streets of Los Feliz, they all became part of the story. Charles Manson wasn't just a cult leader. He was a man who exploited the openness, ambition, and vulnerability of Los Angeles in the 1960s, and the murders his followers committed forever changed how the city saw itself.